The chamber smelled of polished steel and recycled air, an artificial perfection that never sat well with Admiral Grant Mercer. He stood alone, arms folded, boots planted square in the center of the human delegation's platform. Across the vast expanse of the Galactic Council Hall, dozens of alien species sat in tiers of translucent seating: insectoids, reptilians, avians, silicon-based entities pulsing with strange inner lights. Together they formed what was called the Unified Galactic Council, the supposed pinnacle of diplomacy and civilization in the known galaxy. To Mercer, it was a circus. At the center of the chamber, the Speaker of the Council, a towering cephalopod whose massive eyes blinked with unease, reverberated through the translators. "Esteemed delegates of Sol System, we implore humanity to reconsider. The Council offers peace, trade, and security." Mercer cut him off, voice sharp and cold. "Security? You mean submission?" A chorus of clicks, hisses, and synthetic tones erupted in the chamber, a wave of barely contained outrage. The other human delegates exchanged glances, uneasy, but Mercer stood unmoved. He'd buried too many comrades to care what these alien bureaucrats thought anymore. The Council had called this emergency session after months of failed backdoor negotiations. Humanity, fresh off its brutal victory in the Proxima campaign, had refused every demand to integrate its fleets into the so-called Council Peace Force. The aliens had expected compliance. Instead, Earth had recalled its ambassadors, fortified its borders, and tripled military production. Now they stood on the brink of open defiance. The speaker's voice rippled again. "Admiral Mercer, the galaxy cannot tolerate human aggression. Already worlds tremble at your fleet movements. Must we descend into chaos?" Mercer allowed a cold smile. "The chaos began when your fleets bombed unaligned human colonies and called it preemptive peacekeeping. We offered friendship once. You answered with blockades and sanctions." Another surge of alien noise, some angry, some fearful. On the far tier, the reptilian Kalith ambassador stood abruptly, his scaled visage twisted in anger. "Humans are a rogue species, unpredictable, violent. We warned the Council." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You warned them after your mercenaries slaughtered miners on Titan's moons, after you seized our trading ships in Council space." The hall grew tenser. The truth hung heavy, undeniable. The Council had long viewed humanity as a useful but primitive tool, ideal for exploration, expendable in conflicts. But humanity had changed, hardened by wars, united in a way no alien species truly understood, and worse, humanity had grown powerful. With a measured breath, Mercer spoke again, his words echoing through the chamber. "Earth will no longer be bound by treaties we had no voice in creating. We will not kneel to a council that sees us as pawns. From this moment forward, humanity stands independent. All council envoys will leave Sol space within 72 hours. Silence. Then, panic. A flood of overlapping voices, screeches, warbles, metallic protests. Translation systems struggled to keep up. Some delegates stormed out. Others sent frantic messages to their governments. The Council's illusion of order was shattering. The speaker's tentacles writhed. "Admiral, this is madness. You will plunge the galaxy into war." Mercer's stare was iron. "Then prepare for war." With that, he turned on his heel. The human delegation followed without a word, boots echoing across the chamber floor. In the stunned silence that followed, one fact became chillingly clear to every alien power. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now the most unpredictable force in the galaxy was loose, with no leash, no chains, and no fear. The return flight to Sol was silent. Inside the Valiant, a Dominion-class diplomatic carrier retrofitted with military-grade shielding and stealth systems, Admiral Grant Mercer stood alone in the observation deck. Vast star fields streaked past the reinforced transperisteel viewport. Behind him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. They'd been briefed before the council session. They knew this wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was the opening shot of a war no one wanted to admit was coming. Commander Jacob Rowe finally approached, a broad-shouldered, hard-eyed veteran of the Proxima and Centauri campaigns. "Admiral," he said in a low voice, "we've intercepted over 200 priority transmissions from Council channels. Panic's spreading fast. Several fleets are repositioning near the outer rim." Mercer's jaw tensed. He'd expected as much. "How long before they attempt a blockade?" Rowe's brow furrowed. 2 weeks, maybe less. They're scrambling. Can't believe we actually walked out." "Good," Mercer said simply. "Let them scramble. They won't stop us." Rowe nodded, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "With respect, sir, we'll be facing an alliance of 27 species, some with fleets older than our civilization. We can't fight them all head-on." Mercer turned, the cold edge of a soldier's resolve in his gaze. "We won't fight them head-on, Commander. We fight like humans, ruthless, fast, and without mercy. That's what they fear." Back on Earth, the reaction was electric. The moment the human delegation broadcast their rejection speech, uncensored, every network on the planet exploded. Crowds filled the streets of every major city. News anchors, military analysts, and political hardliners dominated the feeds. For decades, humanity had been treated as second-class citizens of the galactic order, forced to bargain for scraps in a council that looked down on them. Now that leash had snapped. At Fort Resolution, the hardened underground military command beneath the Rockies, President Anton Rorden met with the Joint Chiefs. Rorden was an old warhawk, a man who'd spent most of his career warning of this day. Now it had come, and he was ready. "Status of the fleets?" he asked grimly. Fleet Marshal Carter replied, voice steady. 75% of all naval assets are on high alert. 6th and 9th Fleets already repositioned to the Sol Gate network. The orbital defense grid is fully powered and tested. And the colonies? Fortifying as we speak. The Martian yards have accelerated production. We've begun issuing combat alerts to civilian sectors. Rorden nodded. "The Council will move fast, trying to isolate us diplomatically and economically. They'll fail. What comes next is force. Blockades, probing attacks, maybe even preemptive strikes. We will answer with strength. No compromise." There was a hard gleam in every eye around the table. No one spoke of peace anymore. The line had been crossed. The galaxy itself trembled. On Council worlds, fear spread like wildfire. The humans, that brash, reckless species from a backwater star, had thrown the entire order into chaos with a few defiant words. And worse, they had the means to back it up. On Cauldron Prime, the insectoid hive mind convened in a frenzy, debating whether to recall its far-flung scout fleets before they became human targets. On Valoran, the cold-blooded Scythar Syndicate debated opening its black market arsenals to prepare for what it saw as inevitable war profiteering. Even among the mighty Thaelrin Dominion, whose war fleets had long been considered invincible, panic gripped the ruling council. The humans are mad, some argued. They will bring ruin upon themselves. But others saw the deeper truth. The humans no longer fear us, and that makes them the most dangerous species alive. Inside the dark halls of the Galactic Intelligence Directorate, Director Varric, an ancient, calculating being whose kind had manipulated empires for millennia, watched the feeds in stony silence. Humanity was no longer predictable, no longer containable. And worst of all, they had allies. Varric's agents reported disturbing patterns. certain outer system species sympathetic to humans, black market arms deals feeding Terran colonies, and rogue council members quietly moving assets to avoid being caught in the crossfire. The unity of the Galactic Council was fracturing, and fast. "This cannot stand," Varric hissed to his aides. "Begin activating assets in human space. Destabilize them. Sabotage their industries. If we cannot force them to submit, we will tear them apart from within." But on Earth, such tactics had already been anticipated. Admiral Mercer stood before the Council of Defense, his voice calm but steel-edged. "They will try subversion first, assassinations, sabotage, false flag operations. We will answer swiftly. Intelligence and counterintelligence assets are to operate under wartime protocols. No quarter." Across the planet, sleeper agents were identified, detained, or eliminated within hours of activation. Civilian morale, far from faltering, only grew harder. On the industrial megastations of Mars, workers painted the words "Never Again" across massive hulls of new battleships. On Europa's icy colonies, miners volunteered en masse for planetary militias. On Luna, orbital shipyards ran triple shifts under blackout conditions. Humanity wasn't breaking. It was sharpening. In orbit around Earth, aboard the flagship Indomitable, Mercer met with his senior commanders. "Hear me clearly," he told them, voice hard as iron. "The Council will move to isolate Sol first. That gives us one advantage: initiative. We will not wait behind our defenses. We will strike first, and hard." Eyes lit with grim purpose. "Operation Dawnfall begins immediately. Targets: enemy sensor arrays, supply convoys, communication relays. We will blind them. We will bleed them. And when they are reeling, we will decide where to break them next." There were no objections. Every man and woman in that room had buried comrades under alien fire. The time for restraint was long past. As the human fleets began mobilizing, panic spread anew across the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions devolved into shouting matches. Some species called for overwhelming force, others urged retreat and diplomacy. But amidst it all, one truth remained. The humans had seized the initiative. On the frontier worlds, skirmishes erupted. Council patrols ambushed by swift human strike teams. Listening posts went dark. Trade convoys vanished without a trace, each blow calculated, precise, and brutal. And then came the message, broadcast across all council frequencies, spoken in unflinching human tone. "We offered friendship. You answered with betrayal. Now you will learn the price of underestimating humanity. There will be no more warnings, no more talks. Prepare yourselves." The council was paralyzed. The humans were not bluffing. They were coming. And on Earth, as battle plans unfolded and war loomed ever closer, Admiral Mercer allowed himself a rare moment alone. He stood once more at the viewport of the Indomitable, Earth turning slowly below, battered, imperfect, but theirs. He whispered the words he'd carried for years. "They thought we would kneel. Now they'll see how humans fight when there's nothing left to lose." The first Council fleets entered the Sol border 3 days later. It was a show of force, or so they thought. 37 warships, mixed across 6 species, advanced under the banner of an emergency peacekeeping task force. Their orders were clear: establish a perimeter around the jump gates, halt all traffic, and prepare to enforce a blockade. What they hadn't counted on was just how ready humanity was for them. At Lagrange Point 3, concealed among vast debris fields and sensor-jamming platforms, the Erebus strike wing waited in complete silence. Admiral Mercer had planned this moment with cold precision. Let the Council forces come in bold and arrogant. Let them think humanity would posture and hesitate. Instead, they would bleed before they even realized the game had changed. Captain Dane Harrow, commander of the Vindicator, stood on the bridge in full battle dress. His face was hard, eyes burning with anticipation. "Fleet is moving into engagement corridor. Their flanking ships are spread too thin." Mercer's voice came through the command channel. "Execute." No prisoners. The first human salvo was not a conventional broadside. It was an electronic spear. Advanced cyber warfare viruses, seeded by stealth drones days earlier, crippled half the enemy's targeting arrays within seconds. Jamming fields followed, turning coordinated formations into a tangled mess of confused ships. And then the guns opened fire. Rail cannon rounds the size of small transports tore through shields and hulls alike. Plasma lances shredded engine cores. The Council Fleet's vanguard ship, a Thalran battleship bristling with antique but powerful weaponry, was reduced to a molten wreck in under a minute. Panic spread through the enemy formation. The Council admirals had prepared for a standoff, not a slaughter. Now, as ship after ship vanished from their tactical displays, they faced the terrifying truth. Humanity was hunting them like prey. On board the Vindicator, Harrow watched with grim satisfaction. "Target priority? Command ships. Cut off their leadership." Missiles streaked across the void, leaving trails of electromagnetic interference in their wake. A Valoran carrier disintegrated in a brilliant flash, its fighter wings never even launched. A K'lith cruiser, engines crippled, spun helplessly into a debris field, its crew venting desperate distress signals that no one would answer. Within 45 minutes, the entire Council task force lay in ruin. The shockwave reverberated across the galaxy. The Council chambers descended into chaos. Furious demands for retaliation clashed with desperate pleas for renewed diplomacy. News of the battle, complete with intercepted human combat footage, spread across every channel. One broadcast clip in particular went viral. A Council admiral screaming for retreat as his ship's bridge was torn apart by railgun fire, the human war anthem Iron Will blaring in the background. Director Varric of Galactic Intelligence watched the footage in cold silence. The humans had not merely attacked, they had sent a message of total defiance. "They seek to provoke us," one aide hissed. "No," Varric replied, his voice like sharpened stone. "They seek to teach us fear." But even as Council war councils argued and blustered, the human offensive expanded. Operation Dawnfall entered its second phase. Disruption. Fast attack frigates and Black Ops teams struck deep into Council supply lines. Listening posts along the rim burned. Convoys vanished without trace. Communications hubs flickered and died. Human cyber warfare units, operating from hidden stations beyond Pluto's orbit, unleashed cascading digital attacks that crippled entire sectors of Council infrastructure. Banks froze. Fleet orders went unprocessed. Civilian transports found themselves stranded. Panic set in. For the first time in centuries, the vaunted Galactic Council no longer controlled the flow of war. The humans did. In the shadows of this chaos, Admiral Mercer convened with the Earth Defense High Command aboard the Indomitable. "The Council will attempt a unified counteroffensive," he said, voice hard as iron. "They will seek to overwhelm us with numbers and force us back into negotiation." "Let them come," Captain Harrow growled. "We've got more than enough surprises left for them." Mercer nodded. "But we must stay unpredictable. No static defenses, no fixed battle lines. We bleed them with speed and ruthlessness." He gestured to a star map. "Next targets. Key refueling stations along the Andros corridor. Cut their fuel supply, and their fleets won't reach us in strength. Strike teams are already en route." There was no debate. Orders were given. Humanity was not interested in playing by the old rules anymore. Meanwhile, the Council's political order was fracturing under the strain. On Thalran Prime, the Dominion's War Council faced bitter divisions. The younger warlords demanded an all-out crusade against humanity. The elder strategists counseled caution, their eyes haunted by fresh intelligence reports. "They fight with a fury beyond logic," one general warned. "This is not mere rebellion. They fight as if they have already embraced the cost of total war." But pride was a powerful drug. Across the Council, many species could not accept the idea that humans, once dismissed as primitive upstarts, could hold such power. A massive fleet mobilization was ordered. Hundreds of ships drawn from across the member worlds would converge in a show of overwhelming force. The goal was simple: breach the Sol perimeter, force humanity to its knees, and restore the illusion of Council supremacy. Admiral Mercer anticipated this. "Let them gather," he told his command staff. "When they commit their bulk, we strike where they are weakest, hit their flanks, their supply lines, never fight them on their terms." He gazed out over the fleet displays. More than 300 human warships now stood ready, sleek and deadly. Dozens more were coming online every week. But Mercer understood the deeper truth. Humanity's true weapon wasn't steel or plasma, it was resolve. Every soldier, every pilot, every civilian, they fought not for conquest or glory, but because they knew what awaited if they failed. The Council had taught them that with blood and betrayal. Now, humanity was teaching the galaxy a lesson in return. In a hidden war room beneath Geneva, President Rorden addressed the planetary governors and military leaders. "We stand alone, yes," he said, voice raw with conviction. "But we stand united, and that is why we will not break. The Council has underestimated us for too long." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "They believe fear will divide us. They are wrong. They believe overwhelming numbers will crush us. They are wrong." He leaned forward. "Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not beg. And if they want war, then by God we will give them a war they will never forget." Far across the stars, in the cold dark of deep space, human strike groups prepared for their next phase. Stealth ships armed with advanced gravitic disruptors stalked Council assembly points. Orbital mines were seeded in the approaches to key systems. Infiltration teams moved to sabotage fuel depots and sensor arrays. For every Council move, humanity had a counter-move. And with every blow struck, the legend of human defiance grew. And aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer stood once more before his fleet commanders. "The Council believes they are preparing for a decisive battle," he said. "What they are truly preparing for is defeat." He looked each man in the eye. "This is the moment we forge the future, not just for Earth, but for every human world, every child who will grow up free because we chose to fight." A pause. No mercy. No retreat. No surrender. Across the stars, panic continued to grip the Galactic Council. For the first time in recorded history, the Council was on the defensive. And humanity, the species they had sought to dominate and control, now led the dance of war. The message was clear to all. Humanity had rejected diplomacy. And now, the galaxy would burn. The Council called it Operation Starfall, a grand offensive to end the human rebellion before it became an unstoppable contagion. 500 ships from 18 member species gathered from across known space. Carriers, dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, a force meant to terrify and overwhelm. They advanced in carefully staggered waves toward the Sol system, their admirals convinced that sheer mass would shatter the human defenses. But they were walking into a trap. In the dark of the Kuiper Belt, beyond the Council's long-range sensors, the bulk of the human fleet waited, not in formation, not in static lines, but scattered in strike groups and hunter packs. Admiral Mercer had studied every campaign the Council had waged over the centuries. Their strategy always relied on overwhelming force, linear advances, and centralized command. Predictable, rigid, arrogant. Humanity would respond with chaos and precision. Aboard the Indomitable, Mercer stood with Captain Harrow, both watching the incoming fleet data. "They've committed fully," Harrow said, a grim smile on his face. "No reserves." "Good," Mercer replied. "That means they'll bleed harder." He turned to the fleet-wide channel. "All units, Operation Hammerfall is go. Engage at will. No prisoners." The Council's first wave entered the outer system at Saturn's orbit. Their sensors, degraded by human jamming fields, barely detected the threat before it struck. From the shadowed rings of Saturn, swarms of human stealth drones launched devastating EMP strikes. Shields flickered and died. Engines stalled. Command ships lost comms and navigation. And then the hunter groups descended. Human cruisers, smaller and faster than their Council counterparts, moved in coordinated packs. They didn't slug it out head-on. They struck surgically, flanking and gutting isolated ships before vanishing back into the void. One by one, the Council Vanguard ships disappeared from the tactical grid, their wreckage scattering across the system. On the bridge of the Council flagship Vokthar's Pride, Grand Admiral Starn watched in disbelief as his battle lines crumbled. "This is impossible!" he roared. "Find those human ships! Restore formation!" But his officers could barely track their own fleet, let alone the enemy. Human cyber warfare had blinded half their systems. And then came the second blow. From a hidden launch platform near Titan, a wave of heavy torpedoes slammed into the Council's fuel carriers and ammunition ships. Secondary explosions rippled through the fleet's rear echelon, cutting off resupply and throwing the entire advance into chaos. By the second day of the battle, the Council offensive was in disarray. What was meant to be a crushing advance had turned into a desperate fight for survival. And humanity was only getting started. Admiral Mercer issued his next order. Deep penetration strikes. Long-range human battle groups bypassed the crippled Council fleets and moved into enemy rear sectors. They targeted communication hubs, fuel depots, and command relays. Entire star systems went dark overnight. Council outposts burned. The message was clear. There was no safe space anymore. Meanwhile, inside the Council chambers on Elthus Prime, political panic reached a fever pitch. Emergency sessions collapsed into shouting matches. Some members demanded immediate retreat. Others screamed for total war. But beneath the chaos, fear spread like wildfire. The unspoken truth was now obvious to all. The humans were not fighting for territory or treaties. They were fighting to break the old order entirely. And worse, they were winning. Director Varric watched the Council collapse with cold satisfaction. "Fools," he whispered. "You provoked an enemy you did not understand." But even Varric knew the war was entering a dangerous phase. If humanity's momentum wasn't stopped soon, the entire balance of galactic power would unravel. Desperate measures were needed. On the Council's orders, Varric activated his most ruthless assets. The Black Talons, deep-cover assassins and saboteurs planted years ago across human space. Their orders were clear: sow chaos, assassinate key leaders, cripple industrial capacity from within. But once again, they underestimated humanity. Within hours of the first Black Talon attacks, human counterintelligence struck back with brutal efficiency. Dozens of enemy agents were exposed and executed. Entire sabotage cells were wiped out in coordinated sweeps. In one widely broadcasted incident, a captured Council assassin was paraded before the media, forced to confess the Council's Black Ops campaign. Public outrage surged. Civilian militias swelled with volunteers. If the Council had hoped to intimidate Earth into submission, they had only hardened its resolve. Meanwhile, Admiral Mercer prepared for the next phase: the counter-invasion. For too long, humanity had fought defensively. Now the time had come to carry the war back into Council space. In the war room of the Indomitable, Mercer laid out the plan. We hit them where it hurts. Core supply hubs, shipyards, their home systems. No sanctuary, no safe harbors. Captain Harrow grinned. About time. Operation Iron Tide began 3 days later. Human carrier groups launched deep strike missions into Council territory, supported by stealth cruisers and long-range raiders. On the industrial world of Carthos V, human commandos detonated the primary orbital shipyard, setting production back years. On Velarin Prime, drone swarms overwhelmed planetary defenses and destroyed critical energy grids. And on the frontier world of Ithral, a human-led resistance movement rose in open revolt, seizing Council arsenals and driving their overseers into the wilderness. For the first time in living memory, the Council was losing territory, and with every human victory, the old alliances weakened. Among the lesser species of the Council, fear became a powerful force. Some began questioning their loyalty. Others secretly opened backdoor channels to Earth, offering intelligence in exchange for future leniency. Mercer encouraged this instability. Let them fracture, he told his intelligence chief. Divide them. The more they fight each other, the easier it will be to break them completely. Back on Earth, President Rorden addressed the world once more. His words were simple and unflinching. We did not seek this war, but now that it is upon us, we will see it through to the end. No peace until our enemies are broken. No surrender. No retreat. Across human space, his words ignited fresh resolve. Shipyards worked around the clock. New weapons platforms were deployed to the front lines. Civilian industries converted to wartime production. And most importantly, the human spirit remained unbroken. Meanwhile, the Council's second wave offensive stalled completely. With supply lines shredded and command cohesion lost, surviving Council fleets began a chaotic retreat. Human hunter groups pursued them ruthlessly, striking at stragglers and crippling fleeing warships. What had begun as Operation Starfall ended in catastrophic defeat. And aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer watched the enemy retreat unfold. He allowed himself a rare, grim smile. They thought they could break us, he said quietly. Now they know the truth. He turned to his officers. This is only the beginning. As the war entered its next phase, one truth echoed across the galaxy. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now nothing would stop them from reshaping the stars in their image. The fall of Operation Starfall sent tremors through every Council-controlled world. What was meant to be a show of strength had turned into a massacre. Worse, humanity hadn't just stopped their fleets, they'd hunted them like prey. Now a new, deeper fear spread among the Council's leaders, the fear that humanity had grown unstoppable. In the shadowed halls of the Council chambers on Elthas Prime, emergency meetings became daily events. Fewer and fewer member species attended in person. Some withdrew entirely. The alliances that once held the galaxy in check were fracturing under the weight of defeat. Admiral Koresh of the Thalrin Dominion, one of the few remaining voices for total war, slammed a clawed fist onto the table. Cowards! If we fall back now, we cede the stars to these savages. But the Clith ambassador, scales dulled with fear, hissed in reply. You would have us throw more lives into the fire? We cannot stop them. We can barely track their movements. Even Director Varric remained silent, his once commanding voice tempered by grim calculation. His intelligence networks had failed to predict the sheer ferocity and effectiveness of humanity's war machine. Worse, several of his own species' worlds were now openly questioning their loyalty to the Council. The cracks are spreading faster than expected, he thought coldly. This is no longer a war of containment. It is a war for survival, and humanity showed no signs of slowing. From the orbiting war room aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer issued his next set of orders. Phase 3. Invasion of Core Systems. For the first time in the war, humanity would take the fight directly to the heart of Council space, not with static invasions, but with deep penetration raiding forces and surgical strikes designed to destabilize entire regions. Mercer stood before his assembled commanders, voice cold and sharp. "The Council still believes they can outlast us," he said. "They cling to the illusion of centralized power. We will shatter that illusion." He gestured to the holographic map of Council space. "Key targets: Velarin Prime shipyards, Aelthus Prime data networks, Thalrin Dominion's military assembly worlds. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we leave them bleeding." Captain Harrow, his face carved from stone, nodded. "And what about their civilian populations?" Mercer's gaze was unflinching. "Collateral damage is inevitable. They declared this war. They will learn what war truly costs." There were no objections. This was not a war for mercy. 2 weeks later, humanity's strike groups surged into Council space. At Valoran Prime, human stealth ships bypassed orbital defenses entirely, deploying deep strike teams that planted gravitic bombs within the massive orbital shipyards. The resulting explosions ripped the heart out of the Valoran fleet-building program. On Aelthus Prime, coordinated cyber attacks crippled the planet's global data networks. Banking systems collapsed, communications failed, entire sectors plunged into chaos. Even the mighty Thalrin Dominion felt the blade. Human heavy cruisers operating in hunter-killer groups intercepted and annihilated 2 Thalrin convoy fleets. Key assembly worlds lost critical resources, and everywhere the humans struck, they left a message burned into the wreckage. You wanted war. Now you have it. Across Council space, panic reached new heights. In many outer systems, local governors declared neutrality or openly defected. Black markets swelled with desperate Council officials seeking to cut deals with human intelligence agents. On worlds like Ithril and Karnas III, local resistance movements, long suppressed, rose in open revolt, inspired by humanity's defiance. Mercer's strategy was working. The more pressure humanity applied, the more the Council fractured from within. But even as the Council reeled, Varric prepared a desperate counterstroke. If they could not defeat humanity militarily, they would seek to destroy them from within, through treachery and terror. Varric's Black Talons received new orders: infiltrate Sol's inner worlds and deploy bioweapons designed to cripple Earth's population. It was a gambit born of desperation, and it would fail. Human counterintelligence, hardened by years of war, intercepted the Talon teams before they even reached Earth. In a brutal series of raids, entire Black Talon cells were wiped out. The captured agents' confessions were broadcast across every human colony. Public fury ignited. President Rorden addressed the world. They sought to poison our children, to exterminate us in the shadows. They have shown us the depths of their hatred. Now we will show them the steel of our resolve. Martial law was declared across the colonies. Production doubled, recruitment surged, and Admiral Mercer gave the order for total war. No more limited strikes, no more hesitation. From this point forward, humanity would cripple the Council's ability to ever threaten them again. Operation Iron Wrath began with terrifying speed. Human battle groups deployed planet-killer weapons, hyperkinetic rods, and gravitic destabilizers against key Council military worlds. Entire shipyards were reduced to slag. Strategic gas giants used for fuel production were destabilized, rendering entire sectors unusable. On Council border worlds, humanity deployed psychological warfare, broadcast footage of defeated Council fleets, exposed Council war crimes, and encouraged mass defections. And it worked. By the end of the first month of Operation Iron Wrath, 6 member species had formally withdrawn from the Council. Two openly sought alliances with Earth. The Council's once mighty navy was in shambles. Supply lines were severed. Communications were patchy at best. In the council chambers, what few leaders remained faced grim reality. "We have lost control," whispered the K'lith ambassador. "If we do not sue for peace, our worlds will burn." But the Thalran Dominion still howled for blood. "No peace with these upstarts. We will fight to the last." Director Varric, ever the realist, knew the truth. "It is no longer a question of if we fall," he said coldly. "It is a question of how much we lose before we do." Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer received new intelligence. Council forces massing at the Elthas Core Gate, a desperate attempt to defend the Council capital. Mercer's orders were swift. "We break them here," he told his commanders. "No half measures. No retreat." His fleet, now swollen with new ships, veterans hardened by relentless combat, prepared for the assault. And as the final preparations were made, Mercer addressed his officers one last time. "We did not ask for this war," he said, "but now that we are in it, we will finish it." Across the galaxy, one message was clear. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now nothing would stand in their way. The Council's last hope now hung on the defense of Elthas Prime, the ancient seat of galactic power. In the shadow of its mighty core gate, a final fleet had gathered, the remnants of dozens of broken navies. Nearly 300 ships, hastily reinforced with civilian craft converted for war. The Council's battered admirals and commanders hoped to make a stand here, to stall humanity's advance and force them back to the negotiation table. But in their hearts, most of them knew this was not a battle they could win. From the observation deck of the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer studied the final battle plan. The human fleet was vast now, nearly 500 warships, supported by a growing number of defected Council vessels. Stealth cruisers, heavy dreadnoughts, carrier groups bristling with fighters, every weapon humanity had built in these desperate months was now pointed at Elthas Prime. Mercer's eyes were cold. "We strike at dawn cycle," he told his staff. "I want the core gate disabled first. No escape, no reinforcements." Captain Harrow grinned like a wolf. "And the planet itself?" Mercer's voice was iron. "No restraint. No mercy." The war had long since passed the point of civility. The Council had unleashed this storm. Now they would reap its full fury. As the human fleet surged toward Elthas Prime, panic consumed the Council. Inside the capital's fortified chambers, the remaining delegates argued in desperate tones. "We must surrender," the K'lith ambassador shouted. "Our worlds burn already. If we resist further, we will be wiped from the stars." But Admiral Koresh of the Thalran pounded the table with a clawed fist. "Cowards! If we fall here, there will be nothing left. Fight to the last." Director Varric watched them in silence. His agents had already informed him half the outer member species were withdrawing support. Some were even opening secret channels to Mercer himself. The Council was dying. Varric knew it. But even so, he would not kneel. Not yet. And then the humans struck. The assault on the core gate began with terrifying precision. Human stealth cruisers emerged from the void, launching concentrated EMP strikes that blinded the gate's defense systems. Within minutes, the surrounding battle stations were gutted by hyperkinetic rods, their wreckage drifting in silent ruin. Without its gate network, Elthas Prime was now cut off. Trapped. And the main fleet advanced. Human dreadnoughts unleashed wave after wave of railgun barrages, tearing through the first layers of Council defense ships. Plasma lances carved through armored hulls like paper. Council formations, already weakened and demoralized, crumbled under the onslaught. From the bridge of the Indomitable, Mercer watched without pity. "Press the attack," he ordered. "No survivors." Captain Harrow's hunter groups moved like wolves among sheep, flanking isolated council vessels and tearing them apart. On the flagship Vakthar's Pride, Admiral Starn issued a desperate call to rally. "All ships, regroup, defend the capital." But his words were met with chaos. Entire squadrons refused to respond. Some fled. Others surrendered outright. The Council's will had broken. Then came the final blow. From deep space, humanity's carrier groups unleashed swarms of fighters and drones. They poured into the shattered Council fleet, overwhelming what little resistance remained. In a matter of hours, the skies over Aelthus Prime were clear, of everything but human steel. But the assault was not yet finished. Mercer turned to Harrow. "Target the planetary defense grid. Level it." From orbit, the human fleet began its bombardment. Planetary shields flickered and failed under relentless assault. Gravitic destabilizers pounded key military complexes into molten craters. And amidst the firestorm, human commando units deployed to the surface, hunting council leaders and securing critical infrastructure. Director Varric knew the end had come. As his command center shuddered under bombardment, he turned to his closest aides. "We must prepare for exfiltration, if humanity captures me alive." But the room's ceiling collapsed before he could finish. A single human gunship hovered above the wreckage, its weapons trained on the burning remains of the Council's last intelligence hub. Elsewhere across the city, human forces swept through with brutal efficiency. Council troops surrendered in droves. Resistance cells were crushed without hesitation. By the end of the day, the banners of Earth flew over the ruins of Aelthus Prime. In the capital's shattered chamber, Admiral Mercer stood where the Council's highest rulers once held court. Now it was a tomb. Mercer addressed the surviving council members, those who had surrendered rather than flee or die. "Your rule is over," he said coldly. "Your fleets are gone. Your worlds are defenseless. From this day forward, the galaxy will no longer be ruled by cowards and tyrants hiding behind false diplomacy." There was no applause, only stunned silence and fear, and across the stars the message spread. Humanity had not only rejected diplomacy, they had destroyed it. Back on Earth, President Rorden addressed a global audience. "It is finished," he declared. "The Council's capital has fallen. Their armies are broken, their lies exposed." He looked directly into the camera. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of a new order. One where humanity will stand unbowed, answering to no one but ourselves. Across human space, celebrations erupted. But for the soldiers of the fleet, and for Admiral Mercer, there was no time for rest. In a private war council aboard the Indomitable, Mercer addressed his most trusted commanders. "The council is broken, but not yet dead. Rogue warlords and surviving factions will try to resist. We hunt them down. We finish what we started." He met Harrow's eyes. "No mercy." Harrow grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it." As the fleet prepared for the next phase, Mercer stood alone at the observation deck, staring into the endless stars. He spoke quietly, to himself, to the ghosts of all those lost in this brutal war. "They thought we would kneel." His hand clenched into a fist. "Now they will kneel to us, or they will burn." And so the war entered its final, ruthless stage. The Council was shattered, the galaxy trembled, and humanity, once dismissed as nothing more than primitive upstarts, now stood poised to dominate the stars. Aelthus Prime lay in ruins. The ancient capital of the Galactic Council, once a symbol of order and dominion, had become a graveyard of steel and ash. But Admiral Grant Mercer knew the war was far from over. The Council's central power had collapsed. Yes, but fragments remained. Rogue warlords, splinter fleets, mercenary bands, and fanatical remnants who would never accept humanity's dominance. And so Phase 4 began. Purge and secure. From the war room of the Indomitable, Mercer addressed his high command. "We have crushed the Council's core," he began, voice cold and deliberate. "Now we sweep the outer systems. Any surviving enemy fleet is to be hunted and destroyed. Any world harboring Council loyalists will be shown no quarter." Captain Harrow leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Reports coming in. Several Thalran warlords have gone rogue. They're rallying private fleets around the Shadra Belt." Mercer nodded. "Good. Let them gather. We'll burn them all in one stroke." But it wasn't just the Thalran. Across the shattered remains of Council space, chaos reigned. The Clith homeworld was in open revolt, half its population demanding surrender to humanity, the other half arming for guerrilla war. The Valoran Syndicate worlds, once loyal profiteers of the Council, now splintered into warring factions. Some defected outright, offering intelligence and supplies to Earth in exchange for survival. Others sent assassins after human commanders. And worst of all, rumors spread of surviving Council intelligence officers orchestrating terrorist attacks on newly captured human-aligned worlds. Mercer would tolerate none of it. His orders were clear. Root out every last enemy cell. No negotiation, no compromise. The tone of the war grew darker. Human Black Ops teams, many veterans of deep space sabotage campaigns, now led brutal sweeps through the fractured sectors. Council collaborators were publicly executed. Weapon caches were detonated. In one broadcast seen across hundreds of systems, a captured Thalran warlord, infamous for ordering massacres on human colonies, was paraded before a tribunal and sentenced to death by orbital strike. The execution was filmed from space, a single kinetic rod obliterating his hidden fortress in a fiery crater. The message was simple. Defiance meant death. Yet with every success, new challenges emerged. Mercer convened with his intelligence chief, Colonel Brent Wolfe, in the darkened Strategic Command aboard Indomitable. "Reports indicate a convergence of rogue fleets," Wolfe said. "Multiple factions, Thalran, mercenaries, surviving Council admirals, gathering near the Telros cluster. Estimates, at least 150 ships." Mercer's jaw tightened. "A last stand? Possibly. Or an attempt to flee beyond known space." Mercer's gaze hardened. "They won't get the chance." He ordered Task Force Omega assembled, a hunter fleet led by Harrow himself. Their mission: annihilate the Telros convergence. Meanwhile, across the stars, humanity's grip tightened. On Elthas Prime, occupation forces rooted out the last pockets of resistance. The city spires were patrolled by human soldiers in full battle armor, their banners flying where Council insignias had once hung. Civilian populations, broken by months of war, submitted quickly, some out of fear, others in grudging respect. And in dozens of liberated systems, local governments now pledged loyalty to Earth. Not all willingly, but all decisively. Yet beneath the triumph, darker currents stirred. In the shadows, Council loyalists plotted revenge. On the human-aligned colony of New Vega, a devastating terrorist attack struck an orbital platform, killing thousands, including the colony's newly appointed human governor. The attack was traced to a rogue Council intelligence unit operating under the codename Shadow Fang. Mercer's response was immediate and merciless. He personally authorized Operation Black Dawn, a galaxy-wide manhunt for Shadow Fang operatives. Human strike teams swept through suspected worlds, executing known collaborators without trial. Entire Council-friendly sectors were placed under military lockdown. When critics on Earth questioned the harshness of the campaign, President Rorton stood firm. "We fight an enemy that would poison our children and slaughter us in the dark." There is no room for mercy. Public opinion remained overwhelmingly in support. The war had stripped away any illusions of peace. Humanity now fought for dominance and survival in equal measure. Meanwhile, Task Force Omega closed in on Telros Cluster. From the bridge of his flagship Vindicator, Captain Harrow surveyed the tactical maps. "Rogue fleets confirmed," his tactical officer reported. "Multiple formation clusters. Defensive posture. Looks like they're trying to buy time for key leaders to escape." Harrow's smile was predatory. "Time's up." He opened fleet comms. "All ships, weapons free, no quarter. Burn them out." The Battle of Telros Cluster was swift and brutal. Human hunter groups tore through the disorganized rogue fleets with surgical precision. Thalran warships, once feared juggernauts, were ripped apart by coordinated railgun strikes. Mercenary frigates attempted to flee, but human stealth ships disabled their engines before they reached the jump lanes. By the battle's end, more than 120 enemy ships lay in wreckage. The rogue admirals were either dead or captured. Harrow transmitted a simple message back to Mercer. "Cluster secure. No survivors." With Telros purged, Mercer convened his senior command for the next phase. "We are approaching the final stage," he said. "The Council's structure is gone. The galaxy is fractured. Now we establish order, on our terms." He gestured to the star map, highlighting key sectors. "System by system, world by world, every remaining pocket of resistance is to be eliminated. Every planet brought under compliance." There was no dissent. The war had forged a singular vision among humanity's leadership: dominate or die. But not all battles were fought with guns. In the shadows, high-level diplomacy now unfolded. Former Council species, desperate to survive, sent envoys to Earth, offering tribute, resources, and subservience in exchange for a place in the new order. Mercer met with these envoys behind closed doors. To some, he offered terms, harsh ones: total demilitarization, human oversight of key industries. To others, those deemed untrustworthy, he offered only death. And on Earth, President Rorden prepared for the inevitable political shift. "Soon," he told his advisors, "we will not just be fighting warlords. We will be administering an empire. We must be ready to rule as ruthlessly as we fought." The old ideals of the Galactic Council were dead. Humanity would build something new, forged in war, tempered in blood. Aboard the Indomitable, Mercer stood once more at the observation deck, staring at the stars humanity had bled to conquer. He spoke quietly, voice laced with iron purpose. "They thought we were beneath them. Now they crawl before us." He turned away, gaze hard. "And we are not finished." As the purge expanded, resistance faded. The rogue warlords fell. The last of the Shadowfang was cornered. And across the galaxy, one truth became undeniable. Humanity ruled now. The war was ending, but peace was nowhere in sight. Victory had brought domination, not unity. Across the galaxy, scattered fires of resistance flickered weakly, most crushed beneath the iron heel of humanity's fleets. But the task of ruling an empire forged in blood was just beginning. And for Admiral Grant Mercer, the final phase of the campaign was the most dangerous of all: consolidation. From the newly established High Command Citadel orbiting the ruins of Elthis Prime, Mercer surveyed reports from across occupied sectors. Colonel Wolfe stood at his side. "Most rogue fleets destroyed," Wolfe reported. "Remaining Council forces surrendering in groups. Civilian uprisings minimal, though Valoran sectors remain volatile." Mercer nodded. "And the Shadowfang remnants?" Wolfe's voice dropped. "Almost eradicated. We tracked their last network to the outer ring of Ysera 4. Strike teams moving in now." Mercer's gaze hardened. "I want them wiped out. No trials. No martyrs." Even in victory, Mercer trusted nothing. Not the defeated council species, not the defectors now swearing loyalty, not even Earth's own political circles. He had seen too much treachery, too many alliances born from fear, not respect. And treachery was still afoot. Barely a week after the final fleet engagements, an assassination attempt rocked the human command structure. A rogue Velaran noble, posing as an emissary, detonated a bomb during a diplomatic summit on the colony world of New Corinth. 5 high-ranking human governors were killed. Mercer's response was swift and merciless. Operation Iron Fist was launched. Entire Veloran noble houses were purged in coordinated strikes. Their merchant fleets were seized, their leaders publicly executed. In one notorious broadcast, a captured Veloran patriarch was forced to kneel before a firing squad of human marines. His death streamed to every corner of the fractured galaxy. The message was clear: human law was now absolute. Defy it and die. Back on Earth, President Rorden addressed the world. "This war was forced upon us," he declared, "but we have answered with strength, and we will govern with the same strength." Behind closed doors, he met with Mercer and the Defense High Command. "You've broken the Council," Rorden said. "Now you must help us build the new order, an empire that will last." Mercer's reply was grim. "Empires built on blood do not last, unless their rulers are prepared to spill more." Rorden understood. There would be no room for softness. Not now, not ever. And so the galactic dominion of Earth was born. Across occupied space, human flags replaced the banners of the old council. New governors, chosen from among Earth's hardest soldiers and most ruthless leaders, were installed on key worlds. Industrial centers were seized, resource networks redirected to Earth. Planetary militias were disarmed or folded into human command structures. The former council species learned quickly. Submission brought survival. Resistance brought extinction. On Calith Prime, the ruling caste formally bent the knee to Earth, swearing fealty in a broadcast ceremony. On Ithrol, local leaders accepted human oversight in exchange for continued autonomy, a rare concession granted only to those who had aided the human cause during the war. But not all bent willingly. Rumors reached Mercer of a new conspiracy, surviving Thalaran warlords plotting to assassinate key human leaders and spark a new rebellion. Mercer acted with cold efficiency. Task Force Revenant was deployed, the deadliest of human Black Ops units. Within days, Thalaran's safe houses burned. The bodies of conspirators were left hanging in public squares. Entire bloodlines were erased. Mercer gave no quarter. "Purge them to the roots," he ordered. "No seed of rebellion will remain." And so it was. As months passed, the new human order solidified. Human fleets patrolled every major sector. Jump gates remained under strict human control. Trade flowed, but on Earth's terms. Former council species became vassals. Their fleets were disarmed. Their rulers answered to Earth's high command. Those who resisted were crushed without hesitation. But even as the dominion grew, internal tensions simmered. On Earth, civilian politicians began questioning the endless cycle of military purges. "We have won," some argued. "Now is the time to rebuild, not to rule through fear." But Mercer saw the truth. "We have not won," he told Rorden in a private meeting. "We have only bought time. If we show weakness now, the galaxy will tear us apart." Rorden, weary but pragmatic, agreed. "The peace will be built on steel," he said, "and you will hold the sword." Yet Mercer himself wasn't immune to the cost of endless war. Alone aboard the Indomitable, he often stared out at the stars he had helped conquer. So many dead, so many worlds reduced to ruin. Had it been worth it? The Council's arrogance had sparked the war. But what had humanity become in answering it? He knew the answer. A species hardened beyond recognition, Ruthless, feared, respected, but never loved, and perhaps that was the only way. Final reports reached his desk. Shadowfang eliminated. Thalaran resistance crushed. Council territories pacified. The galaxy was now humanity's. In all but name. In a final address to the High Command, Mercer laid it bare. We have forged an empire through war. If we wish to keep it, we must be prepared to rule as we fought, without pity, without hesitation. The galaxy respects only strength. We will give them strength. There was no dissent, no illusions. The dominion of Earth would be an iron empire, or it would be ashes. And so the story came full circle. Once dismissed, once scorned, once told to kneel, humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now they ruled the stars.